good evening. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Stephanie Lomax, President, CEO, and HR strategist, and your host of HR in the Dark, the podcast where we talk about some of the darker side of HR issues that a lot of people don't like to address, but we will address here. I'm excited to be with you today. It is March the 7th, and this month we are talking about employment references, specifically talking about what did you say about me, which is a question that many employees or former employees may have of their former employer when they are anticipating getting an employment reference for their next job. So what exactly is an employment reference policy, and what does that look like? So we'll talk a little bit about that. You know, an employment reference policy really is just a policy that outlines what a company's position is in terms of how they will provide information about a former or even sometimes a current employee. If a current employee is asking for a reference because they're going to be moving forward to another position, but they are still with the company at the time. So the policy really just outlines what the company will do in terms of providing an actual reference. Will they provide one at all? And if they do provide one, what will they say? Why is this important for a company to have? Well, there's several reasons why you need the policy. Number one, employees, particularly managers of current or former employees, may be listed on the reference form instead of human resources, which has become a more generally accepted policy and practice for a lot of businesses to have HR actually do the references. But they need to understand, if they are going to provide the reference, what it is that they are able to say and what they are not able to say. What is the company's policy in terms of the information that will be divulged to an employer that someone is actually going to be moving to. Companies may not want their managers or other employees or coworkers speaking on behalf of them because, you know, if you're giving a personal reference, that's one thing. They call your, personal cell phone number and they ask questions about, what the person's character, et cetera, whatever the standard questions are. But if call the company and they speak to the person in the official position at the company that was serving as their manager, then that technically may appear to the company getting the reference that they're speaking on behalf of the company, and that may not be something that the company wants to happen. So that's the reason why it's important to have the policy. What does the policy need to include? Well, there's several things. It should outline who is authorized, which we just finished talking about, who's authorized to provide employment reference. And if it's not going to be someone that's internal that's doing it, like an HR department or an executive of the company, then will the organization use some type of an outsourced service to call and confirm various employment information? What information will be provided if you're going to keep it in-house? What will be verified? Are you only going to verify dates of employment, position, and title? Are you going to verify and confirm salary information? Are you going to confirm responsibilities, eligibility for rehire? Are you going to talk about performance and how well they did or didn't do? So we need to kind of outline exactly what information is going to be given. What's not going to be provided? I know in my prior experience, if someone was calling to verify position and title, position, title, dates of employment, I would give that information over the phone. But if they wanted to verify anything beyond that, particularly salary information, I needed to have that information in writing as a release from the employee. I would not get that information out over the phone or any other means without a written release. So we need to understand what we cannot say, again, if it's going to be kept in-house. What requests are going to be required in writing? So just like I was explaining, some companies' policy is any information that's going to be given out about a former employee must be in writing and must be accompanied by a release from the employee that they're requesting the information on. So it just depends, how strict you want to be with your policy about giving employment references. And then lastly, you want to outline how long the turnaround time will be. So again, I'll use myself as an example. I would say references would be, or employment verifications would be provided within 24 hours or within 48 hours. So there was an expectation so that people understand when they'll have the information back. Now, obviously, from the employer trying to get the information, it's important for them to know so that they have the expectation of when they can move forward with completing their pre-employment process for your former employee. But it's just good practice to kind of get into, to kind of say specifically when a reference will be completed. So that's really what a policy needs to say. It's important to understand that, from an employee standpoint, they're likely going to only put down someone that's going to give them a good reference. Why would they do otherwise? So if there are performance issues that you are not comfortable disclosing, then you definitely want to make sure you have some very specific guidelines about what information will be provided. I will tell you that in my experience consulting with clients, what I recommend that they do is to have a policy of verifying or providing information specifically on title, dates, salary if it's in writing, to release that information, and responsibilities, and then of course what my position is, and that's what I've done in the past. So that's what I advise clients to do if they're going to keep it in-house. Be very specific. You don't want to give out information that could become defamation of character. If a manager didn't have a good relationship with someone, even if they did leave on good terms, if they didn't have a good relationship, the manager could divulge information that really is more their opinion about how their work performance was, and eligibility for rehire as well. You want to state whether or not they were or were not. Do you want to give that information to the employer that's calling to verify? So that's really the shape of it. It's not very complicated. It's just really, what do you want to do to kind of keep yourself protected from disclosing information that may not be necessary to disclose, or that may overshadow, particularly if it's a manager giving information that could be seen as giving information that's an opinion versus facts. So it's best to just stick with the facts, and that's something that HR can definitely do in-house or through an outsourced service or a consultant of some sort. Now, the flip side of this reference conversation is what happens from an internal standpoint when a company does not do their due diligence in checking references before hiring someone. So when we first kind of talked about, outside, so we have an employee that leaves, and we are developing a policy around what we're going to give out. But what about what information we are requesting or going to gather on people that we're hiring? If you've never heard of the term negligent hiring, you're going to hear about it right now, because negligent hiring can be an extremely painful, literally, and expensive, literally, mistake to learn from. Negligent hiring basically states, and I'll read the legal definition, it's a claim made by an injured party against an employer based on the theory that the employer knew or should have known about the employee's background, which, if it had been known, indicated a dangerous, dishonest, unfit, or untrustworthy character. It's a failure to use reasonable care to verify fitness for duty. And the injured party that is being discussed here can be an employee, a customer, a vendor, or anyone else that the employer is in contact with that was on the receiving end of this harm by the employee. Case in point, and I have two of them, and they are expensive case in points, and very unfortunate as well. In 2015 in Texas, a company by the name of Woven Metal Products was sued by a employee's family who died at the hands of another employee who shot him at his job while in the course of doing his work. Mr. Young shot and killed Mr. Kadril, who with a .38 caliber gun. He was arrested, charged for murder, currently serving a 45-year sentence. The negligent claim case lawsuit came as a result of the fact that the company, Woven Metal Products, should have known or done more investigation about claims that were coming from current employees who were working with Mr. Young, explaining that he was exhibiting erratic behavior in the workplace. In addition, had they done a background check and had they called and done references, they would have known that he had been fired from a previous job for bringing a weapon onto a job site. And that's likely something then, if they had known it, they would would not have hired this individual and would not have had what resulted in a $1 million jury award for this negligent claim lawsuit that the family claimed and won in court. So simply doing background checks and doing your due diligence as part of the pre-employment process is so very critical for lots of reasons. Yes, we definitely want to know if someone doesn't have a good performance record, or if they weren't honest about their job position, if they weren't honest about their dates of employment because they're trying to cover up a gap, which can be explained. But if they're being dishonest about things, we need to know that information. And we do find that out through the course of pre-employment reference checks. However, background checks are so equally as critical and important because of these particular instances that I just spoke of. Second case, in 2011, an Arkansas timber company was sued by a victim's family for $7 million and won because they sued the company because a driver of a vehicle was hit and struck by the driver of the timber company's truck carrying timber, killed the driver, and had they done background check, they would have known that not only did he have prior reckless driving charges, but his license was also currently suspended. So he wasn't even supposed to be driving at all, let alone driving a timber truck. To make matters worse, he had been employed there for 19 days before he had this accident and killed this innocent bystander driving recklessly in the vehicle. They should have known that. Companies, if you're listening to this podcast and you have drivers that you are deploying out onto the roads, I cannot tell you how important it is that part of your policy and part of your pre-employment process is to make sure that not only are you doing background checks and employment references, but you're also doing motor vehicle record checks annually and as needed. And that needs to be disclosed in your employee handbook. The employee needs to understand that it's a contingency for their continued employment, that they maintain a safe driving record. I used to tell employees all the time when I hired them, they came to work at multiple companies when they were responsible for driving. Your personal driving record is now an immediate impact on your ability to work at this company. So I need you to take it very seriously that red light cameras are not the only tickets you're going to be getting. Eventually, you will get caught. If you're speeding and speed camera tickets are all that's getting you, which we did not necessarily find out about and do not necessarily show up on a driving record, trust and believe that you're going to run out of strikes. So it is really important that that information is outlined in your handbook policy as well, just so that employees understand the importance and the seriousness of maintaining a clean driving record if they are going to be driving as part of their everyday job responsibilities and essential duties. In regards to the first case, there needs to be a policy, and we need to take very seriously things that we hear about erratic behavior in the workplace, especially in recent times. We've heard so many incidents of employees bringing weapons onto a job site. So that also needs to be clearly outlined in your employee policies and your employee handbook, and it needs to be discussed and disclosed up front so that employees understand what the expectations are. And there needs to be some form of repercussion that's also outlined and discussed so that they understand if they do violate the policy, here's what the repercussion is going to be. It is so critically important. Negligent hiring, as you just heard, these two cases, and obviously these are not the only two, there's plenty of them, unfortunately, can be very expensive. It can take a company under. And if you're a small business and you get hit with a $1 million or $7 million lawsuit, you may very well no longer be in business. So it's very important that you have these policies in place. It's very important that you follow what those policies are, and also equally as important, you make sure that you disclose this information to your employees and make sure that they sign for the handbook, make sure they sign some type of a document letting that verifies that they have read and understand these policies. References, getting them, make sure that you follow your due diligence and you find out all the information you need to find out based on the type of position that you're hiring for. Giving out references, you want to make sure that you have a clear policy on exactly who can give the information, what information will be disclosed, what information will not be disclosed, and whether any of the requests need to be in writing, and lastly, how long that turnaround time is going to be. That is March video podcast. This was a short one this month, but it's jam-packed full of information, and I just want you to know that the best way to avoid negligent lawsuits is to do references, background checks, and even drug screening. If you need assistance with that, there are tons and tons of resources, professional screening services that can help you to do that. Certainly an HR consultant can also assist with that in terms of providing resources or actually conducting those services for you directly as a service. So definitely make sure you reach out to someone if you need assistance. You always have access to me. So if you're interested in learning more about getting a policy in place that has to do with either negligent hiring, employment references, getting them or giving them out, make sure that you contact me. You can follow me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter. You can follow me there. And also make sure that if you have not subscribed to the podcast, that you do so today. Make sure you do so today. And you can do that by going to bit.ly/expose HR in the dark. Expose HR in the dark. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast there. When you subscribe, you will also get a free download of the 10 top policies that every small business must know. You want to make sure you go through that checklist, make sure you've got all the policies in place that are there. And then of course there are others. So if you need assistance with constructing that, you can also schedule a corporate policy review with me by going to bit.ly/CP review 2018. That's 2018. So make sure that you stay in touch with me, check your inbox for upcoming information. And in order to get that information, you got to subscribe to the podcast. So make sure you do that. I look forward to seeing you next month. April is Alcohol Awareness Month. We're going to talk a little bit more about policies that have to do with dealing with alcoholism and how to identify signs of alcoholism and how that affects ADA, FMLA, and some other really important HR laws that are in place to protect employees that have issues around alcoholism and drug abuse. So I look forward to seeing you next month, which is April the 4th at 9 p.m. right here. Make sure you follow me. I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you so very much for joining me this time. And I will talk to you later. Until then, all the best. Bye-bye.